When we come up to receive Jesus Christ, how do we approach the altar? How do we receive him? If it were the Queen of England sitting here on a throne and you were in a line to be brought up to her, would you just saunter up, give her a handshake, say, "Yeah, nice to see you, Queenie," and scoot? Or would you allow yourself to be properly instructed because you're about to stand in the presence of royalty? And would you ask, how should I comport myself? When I'm extended a greeting, how should I receive? How should I give that greeting? How should I receive that greeting? What should I physically do? How should I be physically in the presence of royalty? Well, you wouldn't get in the line for royalty if you didn't know how to do that, because they wouldn't let you in the line. Within the church, there has been a downgrading of the divinity of our blessed Lord. He's just a friend. You know, he's my Jesus who helps me out with stuff. He's a great man. I want to talk about his humanity so I can identify with him. But all of that happens to the exclusion of his divinity. His humanity flows from his divinity. They're married together, but it flows from his humanity is dependent on his divinity. He was divine before he took on his humanity. So when we step into that kind of presence, for people to say, don't worry about it, just stick your hand out, walk up there, stick your hand out, and go on and leave early. Could you imagine anything more affronting to our blessed Lord, who traps himself lovingly, willfully, traps himself under the appearance of bread and wine, to come up and be so kind of casually treated? There was a time in the history of the church, not so long ago, when you would never dream of receiving your God any other way except on your knees. And there was a time where you would never, ever dream of sticking out your hand like you were some kind of equal to God. And yet today, that's the common attitude. I just walk up and grab God and off I go. How we physically comport ourselves in the presence of God says what we believe about that God. The same way that as I come up here to be introduced to the Queen of England, and how I dress, and how I bow, or whatever the proper protocol is, says what I say about my respect for Her Majesty. This is how we work with each other. Who shows up to their wedding dressed in their worst clothes? Who shows up to their child's baptism drunk? Who shows up to a funeral with a prostitute on their arm? How we behave physically in the presence of God says what we believe about God. And no new evangelization is going to go anywhere until that evangelization happens inside the church. until people begin to recognize Jesus Christ in the Eucharist, until they begin to understand that this Eucharist is the source and summit of everything we do. Everything we do. The indults that were granted back in the, well, depending on which country you're in, back in the 70s or the 80s or the 90s, to receive Holy Communion, A, standing, and B, in the hand, those were indults. They were exceptions to the rule that a lot of people jumped on. Because a lot of people had a vested interest in making sure that the divinity of Christ was downplayed. Because there was a whole agenda, a whole theological agenda behind that. Now, that's not true of every single person who walks up. That's not the point. I'm saying the history behind it. It was good enough for 15, 18, whatever, 100 years to receive our Lord this way, and now all of a sudden it's not good anymore. Because I'm an adult in the faith. As I watch the faith crumble around me. How many Catholics do you see who simply walk into a church and don't even acknowledge the presence of Christ? He's physically there. I see a sanctuary lamp, I see a tabernacle. He's physically there. The God who created you, who created me, who knew us from all eternity, knew we'd be standing here this very instant, is right there physically. We could go over and touch him. And yet people wander into a church and never even acknowledge it, the presence. Never even acknowledge he's there. Could care less. Won't genuflect. Don't even know they should. How is that army of ill-prepared, wounded troops who don't even know there's a war going on possibly going to be able to change the world? They can't even change themselves, much less a world. How are they going to bring salvation, be the vehicles to bring salvation to the world when they don't even know there's a need for the world to be saved? The evangelization that needs to happen in the church needs to happen first inside the church. Right here in every parish in the world, when Catholics acknowledge the real presence of Jesus Christ on that altar and in that tabernacle, until that happens, everything else we do is just a great big social action cause that might work for a little bit and probably will fail in the end. Until hearts change, until men change, kingdoms cannot change. And if this kingdom of Christ is to save the world, then that changing has to happen with us first. And we don't get to sit by and not tell people this. Is the Eucharist the source and summit of the faith, or is it not? Is Jesus Christ the good, the true, and the beautiful, or is he not? Is the Catholic Church the one true faith in the world, and all others are false, or is it not? In the end, Catholicism is a black and white proposition. It always has been. Did Jesus Christ walk out of that tomb on Easter Sunday morning, or did he not? Did the second person of the Blessed Trinity undergo death willingly, or did he not? Is Jesus Christ divine, or is he not? Everything in the end with Catholicism is a simple yes or no. That's it. That's it. And we have to live our lives that way. There is no maybe he walked out, maybe he's God, maybe he died on the cross. It's either yes or no. And everything about us has to reflect that certainty, that certitude, and there is no room for compromise with a world of false gods.